All right, welcome, Chris McLean. Hello, good to have you here.
Thanks, Janusz. Good to see you again, mate. It's been a minute. We had you over on my show, so we're on opposite sides of the camera. A couple of months ago, I guess. Now it seems like a while ago now, but probably wasn't that long ago.
And opposite sides of the world. So I'm dialing in it's 8 a.m. here, and
right, 5 p.m. here. Yeah.
5 p.m. where you are. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Before we crack on, do you want to say hi to the audience and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you do it for?
Sure. Hi everyone. G'day from Melbourne, Australia. Coming to you guys from the other side of the pond if you're over there in the UK. So my name's Chris McLean. I'm a former agency owner. I ran an agency, started off digital and then sort of moved into interactive emerging tech, sort of commercialization space, sort of 2010, 2012, 2009, 2010. Started the agency in 2002, so way back when, way back before Adobe was a Macromedia Dreamweaver and Macromedia Flash way back when, back in those days. So yeah, it was a good 20 odd years ago now that we sort of started and seen the transition through the industry. I ran that agency for about 15 years and sort of exited on the back end of 2016 when I was actually in the Middle East. I took the business over to Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Basically, we had a major airline client that was based over in that part of the world. They sort of moved over there to service locally. Wrapped the business up around then and sort of then went through various did a bit of coaching, did a bit of sort of freelance, bit of consulting work in the marketing space, a few CMO roles, that sort of thing. Worked for a big agency in Dubai, one of the biggest locally owned agencies in Dubai. Sort of as head of innovation there, ran a lot of innovation programs for them, bringing that emerging tech kind of space into the digital space, tail end of 2017, 2018. Then wound back up in Melbourne, so tail end of 2018. Bummed around, did a couple of things, and then sort of COVID hit and sort of wiped out what I was doing. I was CMO at a sustainability company, sort of leading their marketing efforts then. And yeah, we kind of got wiped out with COVID because we effectively we're running a coffee cup program in cafes and the CBD in Melbourne, in the bigger corporate towers, and all the corporates left and all the cafes shut down. And we went into, 6 months of hard lockdown, which I know you guys have just sort of got breathing space out of that over your side of the world. So yeah, sort of threw a spanner in the works. And I think as a lot of people did over the last 18 months or so, sat back and went, now, what does this mean? What do I actually want to do? What am I passionate about? What can I do? What can I do sitting from home in lockdown? And coaching was something that I'd sort of always wanted to get more into. I'd done a bit of it sort of in the consulting sort of role. And I'd done a bit of sort of hands-on coaching with digital marketing entrepreneurs for a few years. So definitely something I wanted to get back into. Over the last 5 or 6 years or so, I've also sort of on a tangent been studying and getting deep into flow science and flow research, and peak performance and optimizing human performance, and tapping into unlocking human potential and all that good stuff. And that's sort of off the back of a probably 10, 15 year journey of self-development, personal development, which was kind of the avenue that I took to grow my agency. A lot of people steer towards systems and strategy and that kind of thing, and we did do that. We brought on coaches to sort of help us with sales process and marketing and funnel and that kind of stuff. But for my personal journey, I lent into Tony Robbins and those kinds of guys, and went down that sort of self-development mindset, motivation, values, vision alignment, all that kind of stuff. I kind of took the woo-woo path, I guess, if you want to categorize it, and kind of went down that sort of path. For me, that's how I thought I could show up better to grow the business. So that was sort of the journey I took, and I bring that perspective as well as sort of peak performance, habit optimization, flow states into what I do now. And sort of in COVID, I decided to send the elevator back down. I guess people like yourself as well that coach agencies, sort of been through it, and you go, yeah, I know how much it sucked. I know kind of where the pitfalls were, and looking back, what I would do different. So that's sort of the perspective I bring back too. Let's help these guys avoid burnout. Like the antithesis of flow and peak performance is burnout, overwhelm, stress, which is pretty rife in our industry. So yeah, that's sort of the 20 years in a nutshell, I suppose.
So I'm dying to get into this conversation. I'm really excited and interested in flow state and having recognized, I think, when you're in flow state yourself, that kind of tunnel vision, and you can kind of see the matrix ahead of you. Yeah. Everything's kind of making sense, and actually what the opposite looks like. So from my perspective, and we see the I see the challenges that agency owners face all the time. We run mastermind groups, we do one-on-one coaching, we run coaching programs with agency owners, and there is time management. How do I find time throughout the day to make the big steps forward? How do we stop spinning plates? How do we stop fighting fires? It's getting me down. I'm working silly hours. All this kind of stuff comes up time and time and time again, week after week, to be honest. So tell us a little bit more, how can we, where do we start with trying to fix this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question with sort of multiple answers depending where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I mean, number one, the number one thing I kind of go to is clarity. Like, what are you actually trying to do? What are you actually trying to achieve? And then if that tends to cause a lot of issues. And for me, that was a juncture point for me where I kind of hit the existential crisis of my values and my vision and what I thought I wanted to be and who I was and how I was showing up was sort of here, and what it took for me to be the guy running and managing a 7-figure agency with 30 staff was kind of going this way. So there was this kind of dichotomy between what I actually wanted as a human person and what I was having to do as a business owner. So when that split starts to happen, that's a point to go, what am I actually trying to do here? And that's ideally a conversation you have really early, when you're starting out, but a lot of us just kind of fall in, and we, so I guess when both of us sort of back starting out, like agency coaches didn't exist in 2002, 2003. It's a fairly new ecosystem. So that specific somebody that's built an agency and is now coaching, that didn't really exist. So maybe we went into business coaching or sales coaching or stuff that was kind of businessy, but not specifically for what we did. But yeah, that having that conversation with yourself and that self-awareness, right? What do I actually want to do? What am I great at? What are my values? What are my character traits? Am I a hard A? Am I hard charging type A, get shit done, happy to burn 70-hour weeks and just crack on and sleep 3 hours, or think that that's a really good way to go? Or would I be happy just kind of doing 75K and just kind of having me and a couple freelancers, and it's a lifestyle play? And that's very different to an 8-figure exit, 10-year, 20-year building an agency strategy. So I think agency owners can kind of get down the path a bit. They've made the decision for some reason to have a 7-figure agency, 8-figure agency, maybe because they saw it on Instagram, or they just assumed they just kind of end up going down that path, or they're really successful and they get to that point. But then the questions start to come up of, do I actually want this? They said I'm swamped, I'm overwhelmed, I'm smashing 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, my health's suffering, I'm not seeing my family, is it all worth it? Oh, well, I've come too far, I'll just keep going. And that sort of tunnel vision of, I'm so far down the rabbit hole, I'm just going to keep pushing, which really is the worst thing you can do. You really want to have that clarity and that self-awareness of, what am I actually doing? That's kind of a point to start if you wanted to.
And
start
do you know
somewhere,
what?
I suppose.
As you were talking, I mean, it sounds like we've been on similar journeys. I went in exactly the same journey, and I think it's true of a lot of our audience and a lot of the agency owners that I work with. We become business owners by accident. We're good at doing a thing, and we enjoy it. We're web developers or digital marketing managers or SEO experts, and then all of a sudden, we wake up one morning and we're managing a team, and we're looking at spreadsheets and Xero and talking with accountants and dealing with contracts and handling complaints and that's a very different thing. That we didn't start it because of that, and then we find ourselves doing it. And for me personally, I had that. I started working with other agency owners, and I really, really enjoyed working with my senior leadership team. It were awesome and engaged and bought in. And then I started working with other agency owners and got that same sense of purpose, if you will. It was work, but it didn't feel like it. It felt I really enjoyed it, and I was like, hang on, this is a really different feeling to what it's like running my agency. Is that? I mean, how does that echo what you see? I don't know, perhaps in yourself and with the guys that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ideal state, right? Is sort of what we call effortless effort. Like it's still work. Like building a business is still hard work, and there's days you just got to grit up and nut up and get shit done and get at it. But willpower is a pretty terrible thing to rely on, right? We don't want to have to show up and grit it out and struggle and battle day in, day out. We absolutely want that in our toolkit. We want that fortitude, and that's built from showing up every day, whether we feel like it or not. We build that, we sort of train that grit to be our best when we're at our worst, right? We're under the weather, but we still got that deck to do. We still got that client presentation, so we show up anyway. You kind of build that skill set as you're building an agency just because you have to. But you don't want to have to rely on that. You don't have to rely on willpower and struggle and battle. You want to get to, like you're saying, work this sort of effortless effort. I'm still efforting, I'm still working, but it's kind of in a state of ease and grace. It's from a place of calm and sort of calm, considered confidence where I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going, I know that what I'm doing in the next 5 minutes is taking me to my next 5 years. Right, because I've reverse engineered that back, so I'm confident, and I can then operate from a place of calm, which kind of coincidentally is the place where creativity and inspiration and innovation and all that stuff that we're trying to get to, that we really want as creatives, that's the stuff we want. That's the kind of juice of life in our business, is that moment of inspiration, that spark, that idea. And that's what we're getting paid for, really, right? We're getting paid for our thinking at the end of the day. And when we're kind of in the opposite of ease and grace, when we're trying to think through problems and we're overwhelmed and we're stressed and, like you said, spinning plates and juggling balls and trying to do everything and not taking a breath, creativity doesn't really show up in that space, and innovation doesn't show up in that space. There's not enough room.
I often say that anybody can run a business when the going is good. When you walk into the office and the team's thriving and leads are being, they're falling on your lap and you're winning clients and delivering great work and everything's going well. That's great. You can ride that dopamine high for a while, but when the going's tough, having to rely on willpower and that's, you've got to enjoy it. I think you've got to be into it to get you through those tough days. And if it's not a passion, it's a tough old place to be. What kind of, so you mentioned flow, flow state as being a thing. What kind of things might you work on? What kind of how might you work with a client to help them get into that peak performance state?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, so a peak, for those that don't know, so I mean, a flow state is a state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. So sort of talk about, it's this felt sense of action and awareness merging. You're sort of taking the right action without having to think about it. It's kind of, it's what I refer to as this autotelic experience where the right action occurs. You think of skiing downhill. I don't ski, but I can imagine skiing down a fresh powder. There's trees. There's stuff. I don't know what's going on. I get down that thing because I'm in a flow state and a bump happens and I just respond and I move and I take the right action just at the right time. That's kind of the feeling of a flow state. We also get this sort of 4 components we call STER, this STER. So this sense of self, there's this selflessness in flow where our sense of self and our identity kind of disappears. So there's this sort of connection to oneness, or the inner critic shuts down. Sure. So that's why creativity and innovation and this kind of thing flourishes in the state, because there's no one second guessing. Right? And sort of risk aversion goes up. You become more willing to take risks because there's not that voice saying, oh, that's a shitty idea, or don't try that, or remember what your mum said. That stuff disappears in the state. So that sort of that sense of self sort of disappears in the state. So that's why creativity, and there's that felt sense of identity slipping. Second is timelessness. So time kind of passes in a weird way. You'll probably experience sort of micro flow states. Maybe you sit down to write some copy, or you sit down to write an email and you feel like 5 minutes has gone past, but it's been 30 minutes and you've written 5,000 words. That's what a flow state feels like. So time either speeds up. Generally, it sort of speeds up. So 5 minutes feels like, or 30 minutes feels like 5 minutes. Sometimes it slows down. That tends to be more like near-death scenarios where you've been skiing and then you're sort of flying off the cliff and going, okay, now I'm mid-air, and you can sort of see the bird fly and see your mate going, ah. But it does happen, but it's more so that sort of time speeds up. That's the general sort of feeling of this sort of timelessness in the state. The next is effortlessness, and that's where we talk about the effortless effort, where it's an effortless state. We just do the right thing, and you can work for 3 hours and come out going, didn't feel like work, just loved it, enjoyed it. If you've just ever had a great conversation with someone, you're sitting at home having a couple of drinks and you just have 3 hours of just great conversation, it flies by. That's that effortlessness. You're not trying to speak, you're not trying to have conversation, just kind of happens. So that's this sort of sense of effortlessness. And the last one is richness, or information richness. So inside the state, we get access to more information. Far-flung ideas start to connect. Our pattern recognition goes off the charts. So again, this is where innovation and creativity starts to happen. And it's really because in the state, you're focused on much less stuff. So you're hyper-focused on the thing that you're doing right now in the moment. And that's why sort of all else falls away. And when your brain's very, very focused, it now has space to go off and connect far-flung ideas and do the stuff that your brain's actually much better at doing, which is opening up and getting access to higher states, or just there's more information. You can process more information in the moment. So you get this very rich experience. So that's sort of how the state feels. And that's why we want to get into it. And that's some of the benefits of sort of dropping into flow states. How we get into them, essentially, there's a couple of ways you can sort of think about. Essentially, what you want to become more prone to that state and become more prone to being able to kind of get into that state rather than have it as a happy accident. I'm sure everyone listening, yourself included, has had some sort of a flow state, whether that's in exercise. You go to the gym and you have a great workout, time flies, sense of self disappears, inner critic shuts down, you feel amazing, you get all of the dopamine and the serotonin and all the great neurochemistry. Or you're writing copy and you just end up writing 5,000 words in an hour and you feel like 10 minutes has gone past. So we want to become more prone to accessing the state. And there's a bunch of different things we can do. So basically flow is triggered. So we talk about flow triggers, without going into the sort of a 3-hour discussion on what flow is. So flow has about 22 triggers. There's 12 individual triggers and 10 group triggers. So agencies are actually a great place for group flow when you have a team. So group flow is a team performing at their best. This is that amazing brainstorming session where you stand in front of the whiteboard and everyone just starts flowing in ideas, and you come up with that brilliant campaign, and everyone, that sort of group think, that mastermind starts to happen. So there's group flow and individual flow, and essentially you can trigger flow. Most of the time, the things that trigger flow are things that reduce cognitive load, so things that get us focused on a specific thing. So cognitive load is all of the stuff that we're trying to hold in conscious memory or working memory, which is actually very, very limited. Talk about phone numbers being 7 digits long. It's because we essentially have 7 slots in our working memory to hold information consciously. So it's a pretty limited processing system, whereas the subconscious, it does sort of 95% of the work, and that's the big data bank. That's really, so you want to pass information back into the subconscious as much as possible. And that's what happens in flow, when you sort of get this sort of dilation and this reduction in cognitive load. So things that reduce cognitive load get us focused, things that get you into it, hyper focus. A simple example, instead of having 20 browser tabs open on your computer, have one tab open and just have the thing open that you're working on.
Yeah.
If you're writing copy, just have your Google document up, and that's all you've got, and you're just in that space and you're just writing and you're doing that one thing. So unitasking, right? Processing and just starting a task and finishing it, not doing a thing and then checking your phone and then going here and having this sort of attention switching, this task switching, which again is stuff that we do a lot, right? We got all these plates and we got to do a bit of that and a bit of that, but that decimates performance and it blocks you from getting in to these sort of peak performance states, because you really want to get focused. You want to have, I'm doing this one thing and I'm going to process it from start to finish. So we could probably talk about this for the next 3 hours, but essentially there's a whole bunch of triggers. Essentially they reduce cognitive load, and they pump dopamine into the neurochemical aspect, as it increases dopamine, increases norepinephrine. So norepinephrine, or noradrenaline, is basically the brain's version of adrenaline. So both of those are focusing mechanisms. So both dopamine and norepinephrine say, hey, there's something here, pay attention to this. Sure. So it's sort of part of that fight or flight sort of sympathetic nervous system, where it says, hey, something important's happening. Let's dial in and pay attention to that. So the more things we can layer into our daily habits and processes and systems that do those things, that get us hyper-focused, kick off that neurochemistry, that's how we start to become more prone to accessing this state.
So similar. It sounds very similar to the kind of fight or flight. I was in an earthquake a couple of years ago in Indonesia. It was a horrifically traumatic experience. I had 3 kids and my wife, and I have no idea how long how much time passed, but it might have been 3 minutes, might have been 15 minutes, but I remember flow state then, the decisions we made to get out of danger and getting a car and, pick the kids up automatically. I was carrying 2 kids, our kids are quite big, and running down the road, and, performance improves as a consequence, and you kind of, you're hyper focused, like you say, and time becomes a consequence rather than a focus.
Yeah, it's a very, very similar state. But again, that's more of the neurochemistry is very similar. The feeling's very similar. But obviously, we want to take the good aspect of that, and we want to trigger that. We don't want to have to wait for an earthquake or jumping off a cliff or jumping out of a plane to have that sensation. That's kind of the beauty of where we're at scientifically right now, and that's why sort of the last decade to half decade. We can now look into the brain, and we can scan the brain, and we can do resonance scans, and we can understand what's actually happening. So this is why we can say at the front end of a flow state, in the first couple of seconds, norepinephrine and dopamine enter the system, because we can scan it, we can look at people, we can sort of simulate this experience, we can map it. So we can start to look under the hood of this stuff now and actually understand, okay, so this is what happens in the brain. How do we now decode that and create it So we know that this is naturally what happens when you enter a state. So how do we trigger that? How can we make that happen without dropping chemicals into it? Dropping chemicals is an amazing way.
Yeah.
A flow state is the only state where you get norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, all at the one time. So it's a chemically addictive state as well, which is why people go off and chase flow by jumping off mountains, and that sort of adrenaline addict is probably more like a flow addict. You're getting all of that neurochemistry. And of course, that is like having ecstasy and coke and opioids and everything all at the same time. So it's very, very, you can simulate that stuff chemically. But ultimately, we want to take that and go, right, how do I make this effective for me as a business owner? How do I get my tasks done in that state? Because if I can get my task work, get my most important done in that state, I'm anecdotally, but anywhere from 500 to 3,000% more effective at that work. So for every hour, if I can be 500% more effective every hour, I can work I can basically work Monday and take the rest of the week off.
Sure.
And be as productive as my steady state peers.
Yeah. It's interesting from an agency perspective, right? Because there's certain roles, I think, within an agency where we have identified this and nurture this behavior amongst our team. So devs, developers, we most agencies create an environment where flow state can happen. Please, go and stick your headphones in, sit in the corner of a room, code away. I'm not going to interrupt you because that's where the magic happens. Yet with other roles, we create the opposite. Account managers and project managers, perhaps, we create an environment of interruption and context switching, and we don't necessarily, I think, associate those roles as needing to be in that flow state or deep work, as Cal Newport would put it.
Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective, and it's very, very true. There's certain, like I said, coding's a perfect example. We're happy for the devs just to go off and sit in their dark room and put their headphones on and just punch away for 3 hours and get a shitload of stuff done. But then me as the CEO, me as the founder, the owner who's doing business development, doesn't think about, well, maybe I could access that, do that same thing and become uncontactable and not have the distraction. I mean, the distraction is the killer. It's probably one of the biggest blocks for flow, and particularly in agency and in any business when you've got distraction and interruption. Like you say, whether that's self-distraction of just not kind of being able to sit with something for long enough. Right? We're just naturally distracted because of the way the world is now. Maybe younger generations that sort of didn't grow up pre-internet and pre-computer games. When we were young, we had to play with blocks and Lego and read books. That was kind of what entertainment was. I'm old enough to know be pre-internet. But I mean, kids growing. Imagine not having internet. We started our business before Facebook launched, right? Yeah. So pre-social media, but today it's just everything's distraction. The world is designed for distraction. And it's actually causing a clinical disorder known as ADT, or attention deficit trait, which is literally the inability to focus, the inability to pay attention to anything. And we say that flow follows focus. So when you're focused, flow sort of emerges once you can get to a state of focus. And focus is essentially elongated attention. So if I can't actually pay attention to something long enough to get focused on it, again, you're sort of blocking flow. And that's another massive way that, I'm sitting, these things are a nightmare. Phones pinging notifications, checking stuff, the environment is set up for distraction and interruption. And they're saying we don't think about putting those same barriers around ourselves as business owners and going, right, I've got to do my business dev, but I'm going to lock myself in my office. I'm going to put my noise cancelling headphones on. I'm going to put a sign up that says, go away, I'm busy, I'm uncontactable for the next 2 hours, and I'm just going to absolutely crush my work, which kind of don't think about that shift. But when you start to implement it, you start to see the benefits and the effectiveness and efficiency that comes out the back end of allowing yourself that space.
Yeah, it's Chris, I could talk to you for hours about this. I think there's a lot of explored territory. I'm going to put you on the spot in a moment and give you a minute to think about it, but and ask you what your top tip is for anybody who wants to improve performance as an agency owner. And I think it really resonates. This topic, it certainly resonates with me. And like I said, this kind of conversation comes up weekly in the mastermind groups that we run, coaching calls. We can feel like we're being effective and productive by responding and solving other people's problems, right? And we're creating a codependency between, our team and us. Everybody's entirely reliant on us, and we're just not making the big steps forward. We're fighting these fires constantly and getting nowhere. And we look back over a month, a quarter, and what have we achieved? Well, we've put those fires out, but we're not necessarily any further ahead. So I think it's really, I'm in awe of the service that you deliver. So Chris, just before we wrap up, for our, the small to medium sized agency owner who's watching this and feeling like, yep, I need some flow. I'm a busy fool, so to speak. Yeah. What's the number one thing perhaps that we can do to help us be a little bit more in flow and productive? Yeah,
I'm going to give you a 2-step number one solution. So number one is turn this thing off. So let's do it this way. So ideally, you want to create flow blocks or work blocks, and Cal Newport talks about that in his book Deep Work, of having, you look at things like Pomodoro method, right? I want to say I want a 90 minute to 2 hour block where I am undistracted. Nobody's talking to me. I'm just doing my most important task. Whether that's at the end of the day, if you're sort of a night person, or first thing in the morning, sometime in your day, you want a 2 hour block and say, this is my time. I'm doing my most important task, whatever that is. Could be building a system, could be lead gen, could be whatever, hiring policies, whatever it is for you. That is my block. That is just on my calendar every single day. And that is undistracted time, uninterrupted time. Nobody's speaking to me. So have those conversations with clients, right? If you email me between 6 and 7 in the morning, I'm not going to respond. Or between 9 and 11, I'm working on your business for you, right? So that's number one, and you want as many of those as possible. Ideally, if you can get 2 or 3 of those into your day, where you've got 2 or 3 90-minute to 2 hour blocks of focused time, that's ideal. But let's start 90 minutes to 2 hours, get a flow block on your calendar. First thing in the morning is great because your attention's better, your energy's better, you're more focused. You can get more stuff done naturally at that time. For most people tend to skew a little earlier. That would be number one. And when you're in that space, put this in a drawer, leave it in another room, put it on flight mode, switch your emails off. And as I was saying earlier, it's just a unitask. If you're writing copy, just have that document open and just writing that thing until you finish that thing, close it down, bring up the next thing. So those would be sort of the 2-step number one thing. Just eliminate distraction, put some barricade around yourself. If you're in a busy office and you're doing that, put your noise cancelling headphones on, put a sign up, put a sticky note that says, F off, I'm flowing. This is my time. Don't talk to me during this time. The same way you're saying that you treat developers, but put those times in your calendar every single day. And the more you do that, the more you do those things and do the work in that state day on day, the more flow you'll start to experience. It's kind of an emergent property of doing this stuff diligently day in, day out. Yeah. Do you know, and anybody who I think who doesn't take your word for it and doesn't believe this is the thing, there's I call it a magic trick. I robbed it. I stole it from James Clear, I think. Atomic Habits. Atomic Habit. Yeah. And you ask somebody else, you say, repeat back to me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as quickly as you possibly can, and it will take. And they do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 takes a second and a half.
and you say, do the same, A, B, C, D, E, and it takes back the same, 1.5 seconds. Yeah. And then you ask them to alternate the sequences. Say back to me, 1A, 2B, 3C. And it typically takes between 5 to 7 seconds. So more than double the amount of time than it would take to do the two tasks independently, because of the inefficiencies associated with context switching between two different sequences, between two different tasks. And it's a really, it's the red light to, holy cow, doing just two things at once is 30% slower. Imagine if you've got notifications and emails and all that kind of stuff coming in, your productivity is down to nothing, down to zero. Yeah.
Attention residue is what we refer to that as, and that's that thing. I'm focused on this thing, and when I switch, I'm still thinking about that thing.
Yeah.
So even though I'm here, my brain is still working out how to fix the thing I was just doing. But now I'm saying, actually, no, I want to do this. And then I go back, it goes, okay, we'll do that now. And then I'm back here, and now it's still trying to fix this one, and you're back over here. Yeah. So that's why that happens. Yeah. But you're bang on. That's a really clear example someone can do right now and go, holy shit, that's just unitasking. We're terrible at multitasking.
Yeah, an impossible task to multitask. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure we'll speak again. You run a podcast. Where can we listen to your podcast? Where can we find it?
The quickest place is to just jump on my website at thechrismclean.com/podcast. And you can find all the episodes there. It's called the Peak Performance and Predictable Growth Show. It's on Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, and on my YouTube channel. But go to the website. That's the quickest place to kind of access it. And check out Janusz's episode. It was a great episode. We talked about a whole lot of amazing stuff on that show. So and lots of agency owners just giving tips and tactics and insights on how they've gotten to where they've gotten to in their journey.
Fantastic. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll speak again.
Yeah, always good, mate. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, everyone, for listening too.